Well, namaskar everyone. Well, today we'll be taking up the ideal of human unity and human cycle. The central theme that runs through most of Sri Aurobindo's major works is that of the concept of evolution. We have seen that in the Life Divine, it is a spiritual evolution from ignorance to knowledge, from matter to supermind. In the synthesis of yoga, it is that of the transformation of the outer nature of the human beings from the ordinary to the perfect consciousness. In the essays on the Gita, we also get how to evolve from the outer action that is based on desire and attachment and to social norms, to that of an inner action which is based on the divine person within each one of the human beings. Savitri, of course, is a journey from mortality to immortality, from the ignorant, death-bound humanity to the supramental race that's based on light, love, and delight. Similarly, Sri Aurobindo offers the paradigm of the social evolution from the symbolic age that runs through different stages to culminate in the spiritual age. So we see in all these major works, the common theme is that of evolution. So if you want to really put in a single word what is the philosophy and yoga and every thought and every vision of Sri Aurobindo, the word is evolution. If you remember that, you've got the secret of Sri Aurobindo's thought. Now his major works on social thought, which came out as part of the series of the Arya, was called the Psychology of Social Development. It was called the Psychology of Social Development, which came out from August 15, 1916 to July 15, 1918. There were 24 chapters in that, and this book, which was subsequently published as The Human Cycle in 1949 in Sri Aurobindo's own time, uses illustrations from the history of the past in the theory of social evolution. So that is the central theme. And now what is this cycle or the human cycle or the social cycle? Well, it starts with the symbolic age. The symbolic age, there is a magnificent sweep of the ages from the symbolic age, passing through the typal age, the conventional age, individualistic age, and culminating in the subjective age. You see, these are the 5 stages of social evolution. And then what is important is, it's not just the stages that we are going to see now, but these stages give a deeper understanding of historic events, the social revolutions, and man's zeal for progress and reforms. And more importantly, we get a proper perspective of our own present conditions of the society and even of the global happenings. That's what is most important, why we should be reading these books, because they make us understanding exactly what is happening in the world situation today. And that's why Sri Aurobindo has been ever relevant, because his books really mirror the present and the past and also give us a vision of the future. And we can easily appreciate, when we read these works, the role of modern man's endeavor to promote technology or even artificial intelligence, and even the hurried pace of management pursuits that are trying to understand the nature of the relationship between matter and man. So nothing is excluded. We understand why technology, why this artificial intelligence, what's happening to the management pundits. So all these things we get to understand in a proper perspective. Sri Aurobindo wrote in his book The Life Divine, all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony. That's a sentence I think that applies most to the symbolic age. The symbolic age of the ancient cultures, which we see basically in India, in Egypt, in Greece, and even in China, had found harmony between the inner and the outer life. That's what is important, the harmony between the inner and the outer life. They led a simple life, fulfilling its basic requirements, guided by an intuitive feeling of life. Most of their acts and actions were symbolic of higher truths or inner needs. That is why you will see that their main effort has been to connect the common life of man, everyday, day-to-day life, with that of the gods. So you can see how it is symbolic, because it is a connection between man and God. That means connection between the ordinary life and the higher truths. That's why it was so very important that they had found a great harmony. And of course the images that were used in their writings were the images that are common in those times, the cows and the horses and the Agni, sun, etc. But they were symbolic. So we do not understand them. We really take them to be that the rishis of Vedic times are asking for 10,000 cows or 5,000 horses, etc. We do not know what exactly is the meaning. Until, of course, thanks to Sri Aurobindo, he reveals the psychological importance of all these symbols. And we get to know now why these Vedic rishis asked for these external things. However, so that was the nature and the meaning of all the rituals. Remember, rituals were not for the sake of ritual, but every act of human life was connected with some god or the other. And that is one of the reasons why there are 33,000 gods, as it is said. Because each act has a level, either it's physical or emotional or psychological or mental or spiritual or subconscious. So we cannot have one god saying Brahman. So they had to have different levels of gods so that we could connect on each level with one of those gods. So they brought the gods very intimate to human life. But that was long back. But what happens to human society? You see, these spiritual symbolism, but one thing we should remember, that is, it does not mean that they did not have a psychological or economic or ethical life. They had all these elements that we have in the present times. But they were dominated, superseded by a spiritual aim. That's why we call the Vedic times as symbolic spiritual times. And then, of course, what happens? There is a kind of a devolution. There is a kind of an evolution or coming down. From the spiritual, normally, this is the trend, we become psychological and ethical. So the next level, that is the typal age that Sri Aurobindo calls, is the psychological and the ethical. And of course, everything that was there in those times, all acts, were seen in the light of ethical values. For example, that Sri Aurobindo himself gives us is that of the 4 castes. You see, the social values become more important. You see, in the symbolic age, the same thing of the 4 castes, the Brahmin and the Kshatriya, etc., They were seen as part and parcel of the creation of Brahman. So there's no difference, there's no high and low, there's less important and more important between the Brahmin and the Shudra. But when it comes to the typal age, we start evaluating, separating, and we say, oh, Brahman means the pious person, the person of knowledge. Then the chivalry, that of the Kshatriya, the fidelity and philanthropy of the Vaishya, and the faithful service of the Shudra. Still, it was not that much of a division, but definitely ethical and social values were fixed for each of these castes. Of course, there's much research to be done. This example I'm taking from Sri Aurobindo, but there's much research to be done to see what other elements of society underwent the psychological and ethical differences. Then, as it happens with human life, the moment there is this evaluation or values coming in, we get to a stage where they become conventional. That means the external and the outward becomes more important than the psychological, then the ethical, and then even the spiritual. Because I think it's basically human beings cannot elevate and keep themselves up on a higher consciousness. So they like to have something routine, mundane, as Sri Aurobindo would put it, as the material mind, the mechanical mind. So we come to the level of lower mind where we need order, outward expression, not only an order but a rigid order. So this is the convention, as we say, these are the conventions of a society. And then the spirit of the symbolic age diminishes and the form prevail. And that is why what we hear, especially in India, the idea of this parampara. What all we have done by my family, by my ancestors, by my clan and class, it becomes a parampara because it's so easy for us to follow some rules and regulations. So this high spirituality where there's freedom of expression, psychological where there's again a freedom, but we cannot deal with freedom for too long. We want rules, regulations, and also it is a kind of a stabilization, if I can put it in the light of Sri Aurobindo. This age is required for bringing in a stability in a growing society. Because all the people cannot be expected to be spiritual or psychological or ethical. So it's easy to give to each one a dharma, a parampara, a dharma, a social dharma, a teacher's dharma, a wife dharma. So it becomes easy. So this is where, in the third level of the conventional age, we had this dharma established, and what became in our society, the Shastra. So we all started saying, oh, according to the Shastras, we should do that. This is written in the Shastras, so it has to be done. So we were confined to Shastra. And in India especially, it was very good because the Shastras had the spiritual root. And so we said, no, I am doing something in the line of spirituality. What Shastras have given, and Shastras themselves were inspired by the Vedas and the Upanishads. However, in the social evolution, this became a conventional age. And later on, we'll explain further what is this conventional age and what is the drawback of this society. Well, when these conventions become too rigid, as Sri Aurobindo would put it, they really choke the human society's growth. And they kind of strangulate the human spirit of freedom and adventure. Well, that has lasted thousands of years, not 1 or 200 years or 200 years. Because it's so convenient to be in a static, station, routine, rigid order. But to go on to the next movement, to the next stage, well, when anything becomes too heavy, then there are some individuals who come to break the barriers, what we call normally the social reformers. And actually this is the difference that comes between the previous age and our age. Not only the age in the sense of the ages, but the difference between parents and the children. You see, the parents, when they were young, they were also individualistic. They wanted to have their own way. But as they grow up, they also get into that kind of a conventional. They get into a kind of a mold of parampara. But when the children come in, they are younger. They think individualistically, and they say, "No, mommy, daddy, this is not right." So they start questioning. The similar thing happened in Indian society and the world society. Individuals came up and they questioned the conventions of the ages. And one of the first things that we see is the revolt against the Bible. And who did the revolt? No one else but Darwin himself. Because this entire theory of the creation, that God created the world in 7 days and then 6 days and 7 days took rest, was again questioned by Darwin's great theory of survival of the fittest. So that means the whole entire creation became a scientific theme, scientific theory, scientific explanation. So that is how the individual started questioning the conventions, and one by one, all this started being pulled down. And that is what resulted in the Reformation movement in the West. And then subsequently we see the Industrial Revolution. And all these revolutions and all of them, they really landed up, as we see, what Aurobindo calls the objective life, which today we call as the materialistic life. So you see, everywhere when we want to have the freedom, no conventions, and then it was most backed up by science. The most important instrument to bring in this individualistic age was scientific discovery and scientific attitude, where they wanted to question everything, they wanted the proof of everything. They'll not take anything saying, even my Shastra is telling I don't believe, I want to have the proof. So this scientific spirit, clubbed with these revolutions, clubbed with democracy, all these things brought in a beautiful individualistic age. So that is where we see society today. And especially this is very obvious in the Western societies. You can see even today the amount of freedom, the amount of, whatever they want to express, they do in the name of democracy, etc. But from there on, there is something else that happens. You see, individualism, revolt is good. But remember one word what Aurobindo uses, the objective life. Because this objective life is taking, hold of human society. But somewhere, philosophers like Nietzsche, philosophers like Bergson, even in the West, they started really questioning, is this all? Even Freud in that matter. Freud also says that's just man is an external thing. To his behavior, to his thinking, to his habits, there is an inner source, an inner, this reason. So such people like Freud or Nietzsche or Bergson and Western philosophers, they say there's something more to human being. It cannot be just the objective life. It cannot be just the outer life. And this, Sri Aurobindo puts it beautifully. He says, in addition to all these revolts in the West, there is this deeper truth which individualism has discovered. That is, the individual is not merely a social unit. His existence, his right and claim to live and grow are not founded solely on his social work and function. He is not merely a member of a human pack, hive, or anthill. He is something in himself, a soul, a being, or is assigned part in the truth and law of collective existence. So this law of soul and being, a spiritual being, comes from East, especially from India. So what is it? What we see? That we have the objective life, the image of the objective life and materialistic life. Some Western thinkers have said there's something more to it. Then India provides that answer saying, no, that something more is the soul. So this is slowly the beginning of what Sri Aurobindo would call as the subjective age. That means we are finding the true subject. The true subject in each one of us is not our ego, is not what Sri Aurobindo says, solely a functionary of the society. We are not a peg in the social work and social machinery. Each one of us, while fulfilling the social external norms and functions, we have really a true subject within us. That is called Atman. Whatever philosophically you call it, Jivatman or Brahman, that's different. So this is how the subjective element comes in. And very beautifully, since some decades, if not this decade, maybe last 2 or 3 decades, this element of subjectivity is propping up. That means especially in the younger minds who are looking for something more, who are looking for something else. They have been plundering libraries and bookstalls and all that to search for something more. And that is one of the reasons why the Western youngsters are turning to India, because in India, or with all its mixtures, it is providing this true subjective answer. So there is this element surely that somewhere or the other, the true answer of the subjectivity and how to find it. Not only to say Atman is the reality, but how to find your inner being is being given by Indian wisdom. Whatever you call Shastras or Gita or Upanishads or the other yogis. This is the beginning of a subjective age. And of course, Sri Aurobindo tells us this curve of the present tendencies will culminate in a spiritual age. An age dominated by a consciousness of oneness, truth and mutuality. So what is the culmination of these ages? From the symbolic to the subjective, ending in spiritual age. So this is his foresight, his vision, his prophecy, we may call it. This is one way from looking at social evolution, how it will end up in a spiritual age. But we are luckily at this stage of subjective age. It is a beautiful analysis if you see how Sri Aurobindo draws examples from countries and societies. It is a marvelous evolution. And the more we read, we understand the why of things. What I want to impress upon you is that why is such a thing happening at present? Be it this virus or this threat from this country or that country, or there's a geopolitical new thing that's happening. The world is breaking apart into different parts and proportions. All that is almost envisioned and foreseen in Sri Aurobindo. So that is one social growth. But along with this book, The Human Cycle, Sri Aurobindo wrote almost simultaneously the same months, maybe a year before or later, a book called The Ideal of Human Unity. This is also part of the Arya. There are 35 chapters, but that is a kind of a sequel to the human cycle. But the human cycle is on the group society level, the individual and the group and the society. And Sri Aurobindo is now looking at that why can't we extend this society, the social growth and spiritualization, social growth, can we extend it on a political level from nation to nation? This is a big step, a huge step in anybody's imagination, because normally no philosopher, no social thinker has thought on this level. People have told us about social reforms, community reforms and all that. But Sri Aurobindo takes a big leap when it talks about the ideal of human unity. So it is a kind of a parallel from the individual social on the human cycle to the political national level on the ideal of human unity. So this is where the difference lies between them. And then we see that Of course, in the last chapter where we see the subjective age, we should see that chapter where it says the individuals will become more and more spiritual, and from these individual spiritual beings, there will be larger chunks or groups of spiritual people who will gather together in one location, or they may be spread out in all over the world. But these individual spiritual groupings are what are important. Even in fact, it refers to that in the Life Divine also, calls them the Gnostic beings or the Gnostic society. So this is the importance of having social, spiritual groupings. I mean, in the modern terms, we call them, not modern terms, in the contemporary terms that we understand, they are called ashrams. But ashram gives us a different connotation, so we will not use the word ashram, unless it is an ashram like the Aurobindo ashram, which is a different thing. However, you can call it a collective grouping. So in this spiritual collective groupings, when they spread all over the world, they come together, making a bigger community, and slowly that will get into a level of nations. Well, this is the link that I'm getting, that we go into the ideal of human unity, where Sri Aurobindo tells us that exactly as a human being, who, as we said, is not just the body or the emotions, but is really a soul, an inner being, the parallel thing comes on the level of nation. So this is the first time we see in Sri Aurobindo how he compares the individual soul with a nation soul. So he calls it a nation soul. It's not just a nationality or a nation or a Bharat Mata, whatever you want to call. He brings in the word nation soul. Because that means what? It has a body, an organic life, a moral and aesthetic temperament, a developing mind, and a soul behind all these signs and powers for the sake of which they exist. You see, this is something we should remember, as he puts it very clearly. Or one may say even that, like the individual, that means the nation, is essentially a soul rather than has one. It is a group soul. Please remember this distinction, that the human being does not have a soul. He is a soul with a body. Similarly, a nation is a nation's soul with a body consisting of the geographical contours, a body consisting of all the individuals in the society, a body consisting of all the organs in the society. You see, just as we human beings have a lung and a heart and a kidney and all that, so this nation soul also has got all these parts. It may have a state like Bengal or Gujarat or a community like this or that. So each of these units in this country, they form exactly the full body of a nation. So we cannot discriminate, we cannot alienate. Just I cannot say, oh, my left liver is not good, my right liver is better, lung is better. We cannot say which is better, right lung or left lung, or this hand or that hand. For our body, every little cell is important. So too for the nation soul, each one of us. There is no question of who is rich or poor, who is intelligent or not intelligent, who belongs to this group or that group, this religion or that group. It doesn't matter at all. That is why Sri Aurobindo says, it's a soul with an organic life, a moral, ethical, aesthetic, developing mind, that it makes the nation soul. And please remember, in this very definition, there's a huge meaning in that. What all we say, we should have a national harmony, national spirit, and national realization. So we in India cannot afford to have social differences, community differences, religious differences. And if we have that, we are breaking up our own body. That is why this concept of nation soul has an immense importance, not only for the present, for the future of India's development. Well, now coming to the next part, which he develops in the ideal of human unity. He says a nation goes through 3 stages of development. It is not the question of, not just as a human being, we also go through different stages. What are the different stages of an individual growth? There, the first is the physical body. When we take birth, we all come with a body, a physical body. But slowly as the body develops, as we get into age of plus 12, 13, 15, 18, what develops more is the lifestyle, the vital, the emotional. So this is how the individual grows from the physical, the body grows. Along with that, the pattern of life grows. The emotional part, the habits, the sentiment, the relations, the one upon one. You call them daddy or uncle or mama. These relationships grow, what we call the life elements, they come forward. It's only later that there comes in the growth of the mind. Then you begin to plan yourself, you begin to educate yourself, and then you say, I'll become this, So there's a level of mind, mental development. It's exactly the same. What I'm amazed to see in Aurobindo is that all the time it draws the parallel between the individual and the nation. And you will see the same pattern when it comes to the international soul or human unity. So this is the paradigm that I always say, that there is the individual, the nation, and the human unity. They all follow the same principles of growth: physical, vital, and mental. Let us come to that of the nation. How does the nation begin? It comes with a geographical contour. Well, you may say, all of us do not have the geographical contours. Even today, we don't know what is our contour vis-a-vis our China borders. Well, it's not that important. There is a tentative borderland, but that borderland is, where people have been living for centuries. They begin to get a kind of a passion for the land, and then they say, this is my land of my forefathers, land of our birth. So they mean a physical land. There is a contour. Even in a state, that idea goes into our state. I say I belong to Bengal or Tamil Nadu or Telangana or Gujarat or Punjab. Each one of us needs these geographical contours. And that's exactly, the nation also comes first with geographical contours. But I will not say the word comes first. They are formed over centuries, over conquest, or one king taking up this ambition of conquering these borders, and then over centuries that becomes part of the geographical part of the nation. However, what is important to remember is that the nation first is born by the contours. And that importance, I'll tell you, that is why when the mother had drawn the picture of the image, the map of India, she herself drew the contours of the country and she called it the spiritual map of India, where she had included the Pakistan, Ceylon, and Sri Lanka, and Burma, and all that, Nepal and Bhutan. So this is really the contour of the psychological map, the spiritual map of the country. Well, unfortunately, politics have played in, human interest and human, the narrowness and ignorance played in, and we broke it apart. But this is the land of India, if you say, this is the contours of spiritual India. And that's what makes the country geographical. That means there is a loose collectivity of life, some kind of a culture grows in, and then Aurobindo would bring about saying the point, there's a common suffering, and there's a common sacrifice, which bind that society, that culture together. So if we think of our ancient culture, the Maurya culture, the Gupta culture, or the time of the Ashoka, these are not just histories for the sake of history. They have combined the suffering and sorrow and all that to make us a strong, integrated culture. That is of great importance. And now next comes the level. Now once this culture has grown up, and then once the geographical boundaries are given, Then, as we said, the second level is the vital and the emotional part, like we saw in the individual. So too the nation has a plethora of cultural activities, dances and music and beautiful structures of temples and kingdoms and forts. This is the expression of life. And India was marvelous in that because it developed many forms. I'm speaking about India only because I do not know much of Western history, but it's the same thing with every country. There could be some discrepancies here and there, but basically it is the efflorescence of the life element. But after this life element, every nation, if it has got to be a good nation or the powerful nation, has to have a centralization. That is very, very important phase in a nation. What Aurobindo calls the centralization that must come in. How does it come in? That is the role of the monarch, the king, the emperor. So now I see why I'm so thrilled by these books is suddenly we get a whole view of this world affairs. Why this king? Why Ashoka? Why Charlemagne? And why this? You see, history books don't give you an understanding. That's why we have started a project called India on the March or Mankind on the March to see the role of each of these things, not just a monarch for the sake of a monarch, but what did he contribute? How did he centralize? So centralization of life is the second evolutionary stage of a nation. And if this centralization doesn't take place, a nation doesn't develop. That's very important. And this centralization, whichever nation takes first, it becomes a stronger nation. And for this centralization, we have great many heroes, great many names, be it Ashoka the Great in India, or we have Queen Elizabeth, Peter the Great, we have Catherine the Great. So each of these great monarchs, even Napoleon, they centralize this entire forces. That centralization is kind of, giving the stamp of a country's genius. But in India, what happened? In the West, this centralization place took very easily because the king was there. But then there has been this history of the king versus the church. Most of the Western history is what you see. There is a great battle between the king and the church because there are two powers of centralization. And there's got to be only one. So when there are two powers, they come to battle because the country has to have a single ruler, be it the church or the king. So after a long battle, the king became the monarch in the Western countries. But what happened in India? There has been a struggle, definitely. But then, unfortunately, the centralization never took place in India. There are so many kings. I mean, really, I keep on saying I'm really interested in this. Why Akbar came? Why the Mughals came? Why the Britishers came? Now we understand. Because left to Indian kings, there was no centralization. Indian kings were great. They're great coordinators, not great powerful people. They're coordinators between the society. The protectors of the people against the enemy kingdoms, protectors of your religions, protectors of your rituals, protectors of the society. But they did not have the power. Why? Aurobindo gives us the secret. He says India could never be centralized because of its Brahmins. Brahmins were great advisors. But they did not allow the political power to be centralized. It may be good or bad. But the reason is, you see, like in the West, the church and the king, they fought. But here, our king did not fight the Brahmins, the advisors, the rishis, the pandits. So the pandits were ruling and the king was more or less a dummy. So Sri Aurobindo says the centralization never took place. And this is because of our caste system. There's so very powerful a caste system that we did not allow even the king to rule. So our great kings were all great because of their goodness, but they failed in their duty, that is centralizing the country. And now you can understand what happens. Nature will not keep an eternal patience saying, okay, you Indian kings are good and I'll wait for you. It has given chances. That is the role of your Chanakya, your great Mughals, great this thing. Every great emperor that who looked after the country saying, I'll build an empire, Maurya Empire or Gupta Empire or this empire, it was an attempt to centralize. But it never achieved. It was a temporary centralization. So India could never become an empire. There was never a centralization. And therefore, now you understand, and therefore, the invasion of the Mughals was inevitable. There had to be a Mughal emperor, somebody called Akbar, somebody called this, somebody, good or bad, I do not want to mention the individual kings. But at least these people started centralizing. But they too, because of the strong caste system in the country, even the Mughals could not centralize. There are all the kingdoms, all the money and all that, but no chance. Sri Aurobindo says there's one people here in Rajputs in India who were successful in centralizing their power. That means the political centralization. And there's this Guru Nanak, the Sikhs community. The Sikhs have succeeded in centralizing the spiritual power, not the political power. And yet it was a centralization. One was political, Sikh community was spiritual. But the rest of the attempts were failed. So Sri Aurobindo explains that there had to be a foreign rule that had to come in, a foreign invasion that had to come in to centralize India. I mean, now the whole history falls into place. We have no prejudice against Britishers or Muslims or Mughals or this or that when we see in this broad perspective of the country. And this centralization also took place. The Britishers were brought in because even the Mughals did not succeed in this centralization. So there's another power, a foreign power. You see, when the Mughals came, it's nice to think that even the Mughals were absorbed by India, our Indian culture, our Indian caste system, our Indian religion. Of course, there was the religious differences were there, but the lifestyle, we absorbed them. So it had to be a completely an alien culture called the Western culture, the British culture, who nature brings in. And remember, this culture, this country was a tiny country, but they were more open to nature's forces. They had gone from the conventional age to the individual age. But whereas we in India, we were stuck in the conventional age. Whereas we in India, we could never have the successful centralization of the power. So now you understand. You see, it is difficult to swallow, I know. Some of us who feel patriotic, nationalistic, and they say, oh, millions were killed, and this famine, and that famine, and this war, and that war. Who is responsible for that? We. We, the lovers of our conventions. We, the blind followers of our Shastras. When the times demanded, we never obeyed. So the Britishers had to be brought in, and they brought in for two purposes. They were brought in for two purposes. One, to break this Brahmanism. Remember, to break this power of the Brahmin caste and to amalgamate the whole power in the central political power. So they became the rulers under the Queen Elizabeth under their own British rulers, kings and queens. But in India, for the first time, a centralization took place. We were a country, but we are beginning to be a nation now. First stage, we had a great culture, a variety of culture, marvelous. Take it science, take it poetry, take it dances, take it culture. Everywhere we are marvelous. But nation does not belong to that stage. It has to grow on. Because remember, we have to move on to a next stage. And that is what even Lord Krishna had done. All of us worship the Lord as great Lord and Avatar and all that, fine. But as I told you, Avatar doesn't come just for the sake of a magic, of a spirituality. He has also got a mission in his life. And Sri Krishna's mission was to build the nation called country of Bharat. That is why he even promotes the Kurukshetra war, because he wants to have one nation. So this, what Sri Aurobindo is telling us, is really exemplified, is justified, is supported by our own history and by our own Sri Krishna himself. However, coming back to the Britishers, we had to go through great sufferings. I do not deny that. Injustice, all that. And yet, what nature wanted, it succeeded. It brought in a centralization of power. And once it was done, its role was over. There's one more thing before I go forward. This centralization has happened, but there's another second contribution. That is, the country that was sleeping in its conventional age for centuries together, was given a jolt to wake up from its slumber. And that is what was a contribution. This slumber, we woke up from the slumber in what way? By revolt. By people revolting against the British Empire. So this itself was something that is very positive. When great masters came to revolt, not only first politically, but social revolts, individuals brought in an individualistic age. That means the beginnings of the individual came in thanks to Britishers. Because when there is an external pressure and a force, there is an awakening. Without that external force, nobody challenged the Britishers, neither socially nor politically. So two things happened. Conventionalism was gone, centralization became possible. So once this was done, in fact, I have just here an example. The Sri Aurobindo writes, the movement of Bengal, 1905. In Bengal, pursued a quite new conception of the nation, not merely as a country, but a soul, a psychological, almost a spiritual being. And even when acting from economical and political motives, it sought to dynamize them by this subjective conception and to make them instruments of self-expression rather than objects in themselves. He gives an example of Bengal, which was almost a kind of a sub-nation India. Its culture was so brilliant, so vast, so influential. It was almost called a sub-nation. But here Sri Aurobindo says, for the first time, there was this subjective age. That means Bengal considering itself as a soul, as Durga Mata, somebody, a definition of a deity. So Sri Aurobindo, and now this explains why so many of our spiritual stalwarts took birth in Bengal, because that was considered a sub-nation with a soul. He gives an example. However, now coming back to the second stage, the coming of the Britishers. So you see, try to understand in simple terms that nature brought the British Empire, British people, to not to colonize, but to awaken India from its conventional age and to bring centralization. And once their purpose was over, they went out. And now I understand why the mother said that the Britishers will go just as they came in. For a long time I did not understand what it meant. But now I understand. They came in, they were brought in to do this work. And once the work was over, it's not your revolts or my revolts or this man leader and that man. Nothing of this. These are all external puppetry shows. What is important is their role once finished, they had to withdraw. So all the drama of this independence movement and all that is only a kind of a puppet show that is being done from the upper consciousness. There's one message that Sri Aurobindo gave just, and I got it just fortunately today. He says the great weakness of the country of India has been one, that it never took the masses into account. And he says the Britishers and the foreigners came not defeating India, but defeating a few chosen people. That means the politicians, but in the upper class of people. So he says, it is only the Marathas, the Shivaji, who awoke the masses. But unfortunately, the Marathas also could not succeed, could not continue after Shivaji, because this nationalism, this group, these masses were forgotten. And now understand again why Sri Aurobindo took part in Bengal movement, in the national movement. Not to gain a power, not to gain a position, not to gain any name or fame. But as he put it beautifully, he says, I awoke the masses. So his entire role in the freedom movement was only to wake up the masses. And that is what he always held, that India has been a weak country because it has never taken the masses into account in its ruling. Only the Kshatriyas, only the Brahmins, only the kings, the Britishers and the Mughals, they conquered them. That's why they could never conquer the people, the praja. The society, the culture, the religion, everything of India remained same because the masses did not participate in the political game. That is the second stage of our country. So once India became centralized, Britishers had no more role, and all the drama, all the names are only puppets. Well, it's interesting puppetry, but from the point of view of the higher consciousness and Sri Aurobindo's explanation, these do not hold much water. Yeah, for history, for youngsters, for blah blah blah, it's good. But from the point of view of spiritual evolution, social evolution, this is the role. And now comes the third part. What did we see? The physical, the vital emotional, the physical, the centralization. That means the physical was over, the emotional is over. Now comes the mental. After the independence, there came in the question of the mental. But there's one more thing that I would like to stress before I go forward. You see, what Sri Aurobindo brought into this revolutionary movement was, as I told you, awakening of the masses. And what was this secret of this awakening of the masses? He writes all that in the Bande Mataram. What did he write in the Bande Mataram? Not to say how to fight the Britishers or the empire, Britishers are wrong or bad, nothing of the sort. There's no criticism of the Britishers. But there's only one slogan, one word, one phrase. Let us be ourselves. The whole secret of Sri Aurobindo's movement, revolutionary movement, is one phrase, let us be ourselves. That means we have got to be ourselves and be a different country from the others. We are a different country from others. Let us not imitate and forget ourselves. And that is the beginning of the awakening of the national soul. I mean, I've got to understand a lot many things, many more. The more you read Sri Aurobindo, things become clearer. You say, why did Sri Aurobindo have to participate in this revolutionary movement as if he had no better work? No. He says, no. He has only shown the country that you are different. And in your difference lies is your destiny. And so he says, every country that has fought for its independence is exactly based on the same rule, that we are different from your super force, great Western civilization. We have got all the material strength. We are not that developed. We are poorer people, but we are we. So he says, even these great powers that were there, we did not accept them. And those countries and nations and small ones which accepted the foreign culture, alas, poor show, they lost their culture. But even a small country like Ireland, they did not accept the Britishers. But they said, no, we are a different nature, we are different. However great you may be, I am myself. So that is the role of the Astitva. That is me. And now understand, Sri Aurobindo, entire power in the Vande Mataram and Karma Yoga and everything is, who are we, what are we, why are we, and what is our destiny. That was the second phase. Once we had the independence, we were given the independence not by any individual, but by our destiny. Because nature brought the outsiders to give us something. Once they gave us, nature just withdrew them overnight. There was no battle between British. There were revolts, okay. There were all the satyagrahas, okay. But it could have been worse. But the Providence said, no, the role of British is over. Now comes the third phase. The third phase, as we said, is the mental. Now the mind after the independence had to come into its own play. I mean, it had to realize itself, consolidate all its past, do the damage control, and bring back this national pride. I mean, bring together the geographical, the emotional, and the developmental activities. And that is why just after independence, we see so much of developments. Developments where? We had mostly the developments on physical level, because physically we had so much damage during the rules of the Mughals and the Britishers. However, that is the story that's taking place now. Today, we are still a nation in the third stage. A nation in the third stage means a nation that's still finding its national entity, national soul. Because after this physical, vital, and the mental level, then it is ready to be part of a spiritual, or to be part of a future world unity. Until you become yourself, you cannot become part of a larger aggregate. That's for sure. And there we have an example. Well, before I give the example, there's one interlude that Sri Aurobindo brings in this book. He says, nature was in a great hurry to bring these nations together. But it did not wait for all the nations to find their own nation soul. There were many of them in the second level of the vital and the life principle. And then he started building empires. The great Roman Empire, the great other empires, the British empires, all of them. But the empires contributed, just see the trick. Empires were brought in for the same purpose that the Britishers were brought into India. What was that? To bring centralization. So empires succeeded in bringing a centralization to all the countries that they had occupied or conquered. But at what cost? At the cost of a complete massacre of the cultures of the individual countries. Nature said, this kind of a subjugation I will not allow. So you must have seen all the great empires which seemed at once upon a time impossible to be conquered. They withered away. We know the history of Roman Empire, just a little, clans and the savages who were not even well trained. They could defeat a Roman army, and they plundered the entire Rome city. What I mean is, you see, there's one thing that we learn from Sri Aurobindo's book. It's all nature, it's all the divine providence which is doing things. When the time comes, an empire or a country or a ruler, they all had to withdraw. That is how the empires did not last. Then comes the third level. Sri Aurobindo says, so the nation, the nature has learnt a lesson. that these empires are a failure. I have to pay too much cost. That is subjugation of individual life. So it brought in a new collectivity, a new attempt at human unity. And that is the third level that Sri Aurobindo is moving on to, the level of what we call a human unity. But this time, what is the principle? The principle is not that of a globalization where the more powerful will conquer the lesser powerful. He says this idea of human unity has to be floated. And this idea was floated just after the French Revolution with this great slogan, liberty, equality and fraternity. So for the first time, there was this ideal of humanity coming together in the spiritual liberty, equality and fraternity. But it remained a political slogan. And immediately nations and chunks of nations caught up this ideal. But you know very well what happened to liberty. The countries which followed liberty and came up with the political democracy did not bring forth politicians who represented the ideals that are demanded by the people. And you know, I don't have to describe the politicians, you know much too well. They're full of pettiness, self-deception, corruption, and even mental impotence. They are the opportunistic moneyed class of people who barter all moral principle for power and money. That was the failure of democracy. And then whereas the socialistic states, they're all ruled and guided by single party agents, the most powerful people. So in a way, history has failed. But remember, all these things we are telling it in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. But it took hundreds of years. But nature did experiment. You see, one thing that we see in nature, it is not in a hurry. It gives full chance to full of every ideal that comes forth. So now what is happening in the world is a collapse of these two ideals. And it has gone to the extreme. It is not yet, there's no returning. It's not yet a collapse in the sense we'll go back to the roots. No. But in the Sri Aurobindonian light, both liberty and equality cannot fulfill themselves because the third element of fraternity is still missing. That's where we see that Sri Aurobindo says a new policy has to come into picture. And that policy is the question of the new mantra, if I can put it, is unity in diversity. This is the mantra of fraternity that India has to bring in. So if a nation can follow this new mantra of unity in diversity, then and then only liberty will be fulfilled and the policy of equality will be fulfilled, not otherwise. And this, based on this principle, India has survived. India is growing. India's policies are there. India's spiritual policy is there. So today, if India is what it is a definition of unity in diversity on all levels. So Sri Aurobindo tells us this fraternity, to bring fraternity, is the role and destiny and mission of India. We may have all the inner political fightings, but if we have to fulfill our role as the Guru in the world, we can do so only by fulfilling this principle of unity and diversity. It is as if destiny and the divine have given India this role, that you must fulfill the role of fraternity based on spirituality. And that is how it says India will have to be following this with all the sufferings, with all the problems, with all the inbuilt things. But you cannot leave this principle. Because if India leaves this principle of unity and diversity, the world is gonna go. There is no future for the world. So Sri Aurobindo says, based on this, nature is trying out a new way of groupings. what we call a free larger groupings of nations, a federation of nations he calls. So you see, there is no empire here. That means automatically those nations which have fulfilled themselves will group together. And a most brilliant example is that of European nations. And Sriaurobindo spoke about it as European unity in his own book, Ideal of Humanity, in 1917, long before it was really launched. But he gave the example of European unity, European nations. And that shows one thing. That means those countries nations which are joining this European unity have gone through the third level also. That means they have found their astitva. They have become a nation after going to the physical, the vital, the mental, and now they say, oh God, this is myself. Now I can join a larger national entity, groupings. It's a free grouping, remember. There's nobody to say you must join this Asiatic group or the Western group or the Indian group, no. We tried a subcontinent group called SACAR. Have you succeeded in that? No. Why? Well, there are many reasons, political reasons, religious reasons. But those are not the reasons why we did not succeed. The real reason is we have not become nations. Pakistan has not become a nation, nor Bangladesh, nor Sri Lanka, nor Bharat, nor Nepal, nor Bhutan, nor Burma. Imagine what happens. If a part of a body is chopped off, it cannot exist. It cannot find its own real entity. So when the mother drew this map of spiritual entity, spiritual body of the country of Bharat, that means all these parts together, they become one nation. So unless India becomes once again that full body, India also will not be a nation in the proper sense. But Sriaurobindo in his message of 1947 does say that all these nations will have to come together, make up one body in whatever the political form. He doesn't say there must be Akhanda Bharat or Bharat nation, no. In whatever form, all these separated parts must come together. Then India will have its birth. Then perhaps it can be the ruler, it can be the guru, because it would have found its national soul, nation soul. So until then, we have to see how the world is moving. So whatever we are today with little broken pieces, we have to maintain our astitva, our dharma of becoming a center of this unity and diversity. And there's one more point which in some other book he writes, not in this book. He says India's mission is to unite all religions. This is the mission that is given to the country. Each nation has got a mission, and the mission of Bharat is to become a melting pot of all the world religions. That is why now in all its great history, it has invited, almost if I can say, different religions. So today we have a completely beautiful platform of all the world religions. But some have not gelled into Indian culture, unfortunately. But that's what it is. So one side India is becoming this. The other side Sriaurobindo says there's going to be a free groupings of nations. We have got examples of the European nation. And then he says that this is the future of the world, but this political togetherness is not sufficient. So just as India cannot be calling itself a nation without the spirit of patriotism. You see, we may call it a sense of psychological emotion or a sense of patriotism. It is psychological, no doubt about it. But it's that psychological factor which is keeping you together. Similarly, when these world groupings take place, they have to have one more psychological factor. Not patriotism, not nationalism, but there's oneism. There's the religion of humanity. So until and unless humanity takes up this new religion called religion of humanity, and this religion of humanity where human beings become the Godhead. I mean, it is a wonderful notion, concept, but humanity has to be worshipped. And remember this beautiful word, religion of humanity. Because prior to Sri Aurobindo calling this a religion of humanity, there was this principle of humanism, which had come from the West, from the 18th century, 19th century. Humanism means for the sake of man. We will do everything for the sake of man, his welfare, his health, his society, his country, his material wealth, all that. But Sri Aurobindo says this ideal of liberty, of equality, etc. is a political ideal now. Sri Aurobindo adds the word religion of humanity, not humanism alone. Because the sense of religion is not the one that we have here in present religions. That means humanity itself becomes a Godhead. Means what? It is a spiritual manifestation of the divine. So with this one little phrase, religion of humanity, it is nothing else but a complete spirituality which goes above all religions. That means we have no single Godhead of the East or the West or the North or the South, where all of us, the human beings, become the Godhead to be worshipped. Worshipped as what? As manifestations of the divine. So there is a total oneness. There is no discrimination or distinction between nations and castes and creed and religions and all that. So Sri Aurobindo says, religion of humanity is the only psychological spiritual factor that can bring together humanity. It's a long journey, no doubt. But as just nationalism was brought about by the spirit of patriotism, and Sri Aurobindo calls each nation as a Shakti. So similarly he says, tomorrow's humanity will come together only by the spirit of religion of humanity. Otherwise, like Britain has done, there could be Brexit, there could be tomorrow France can go out. What is it that's holding them together? Not the economic power. You say at present the economics are holding them together because they have a tremendous economic advantage. The countries coming together. For sure, when the predicts even that will not last. Because there will be some revolt, some dissatisfaction, and they will go away. So he says, religion of humanity is the one factor that can hold together the human unity. And I'll just read out one definition of religion of humanity. For that essentially must be the aim of the religion of humanity, as it must be the earthly aim of all human religion, love, mutual recognition of human brotherhood, a living sense of human oneness and practice of human oneness in thought, feeling and life, the ideal which was expressed first some thousands of years ago in the ancient Vedic hymn, and must always remain the highest injunction of the spirit within us to human life upon earth. So how wonderful it is, Sri Aurobindo takes us back to the Vedanta, that all this is really Sarvam Vedam Khalu Brahman. All this is Brahman. So Isha Vasyamidam, all that is pervaded by one spirit, one divine. So unless he says it becomes a living sense of human oneness and practice of human oneness in thought, feeling and life. It's not just that you write it in books or you put it in your seminars and webinars. It must be a practical reality. So until then it says, and must always remain the highest injunction of the spirit within us. Till that is brought about, the religion of humanity remains unaccomplished. With that done, the one necessary psychological change will have been effected, without which no formal and mechanical, no political and administrative unity can be real and source. If it is done, that outward unification may not even be indispensable, or if indispensable, it will come out naturally. Not as now it seems likely to be by catastrophic means, but by the demand of the human mind, and will be held secure by an essential need of our perfected and developed human nature. A wonderful passage. You see, now here I am bringing together the human cycle and the ideal of human unity. The human cycle, we ended saying, that humanity will be growing towards a spiritual age. And it's only with the coming of the spiritual age that we can have human unity. Because at that time, as I said, Sri Aurobindo has predicted that in the spiritual age, each one of us will have this consciousness of unity and oneness with the divine. So it's the same consciousness of oneness of the divine that will bring in this unity. No other mechanical or political or administrative unity can be real or secure. And Sri Aurobindo deals, so beautifully, he brings about chapter after chapter dealing with the political, administrative and economic unity. Will they sustain the world unity? No. He brings in all the advantages, but then he says it's going to fail. What a wonderful analysis he makes, and laboriously. It's not just one or two sentences. He has dedicated chapter after chapter to see how all this are possible or not. And then he says, if this sense of oneness of the divine comes in, all this unity will come naturally. It will grow up naturally, but not by this catastrophic means. You see, at present, the world is going through a catastrophic means. It is regrouping the world. There is a kind of a free grouping of nations, but that will not last. There's got to be the spiritual age. So he says, what had started in this book, he starts saying, right in the beginning of the societies, there were clans and villages which had satisfied man's collective living on the physical level. You see, when the society grows, on the physical level, there are first clans and villages. Then there became the city-states, which was there more on the vital, emotional level. And then as societies and the city-states grew up, there came the nation. So the nation is the representative of the human mind. So he says a nation is immortal. That is the greatest unit that nature has brought about till now. Because we human beings are at the level of the mind. So obviously the mind is the physical image of nation, of a nation. So if you want to go beyond nation, you have to go beyond mind. You see, if you want to have a human unity, which is beyond the structure of nation, obviously the consciousness of man has got to go beyond mind. Obvious, we don't have to explain, we have seen the whole analysis. So it's only a spiritual age that can bring in a human unity. No amount of administration, politics, economics, army, military, nothing will work. And Sri Aurobindo has proven nothing will work. And that's why these two books put together are a marvelous vision and a prophecy of humanity's future. And then, as usual, Sri Aurobindo writes, at present, it may seem only an idea. You remember in Savitri, he has the same thing, man shall not believe until the work is done. And he says, believe shall be not until the work is done. A similar note, he says, at present the human unity, it may seem only an idea and a word, unable to become a living reality, but is the idea and the word expressing what was concealed in the spirit which preside over creation. The time will come when they will be able to seize on the force that works and turn it into an instrument of a greater and fairer creation. The nearness or the distance, people will ask, when will that human unity come? Will it come or not? Marvelous answer, he says, the nearness and the distance of the time depends on the fidelity of the mind and will of man to the best that he sees and the insistence of his self-knowledge, unobsessed by subjection to the circumstances he suffers and the machinery he uses, to live out his truth within himself so that his environment may accept it and his outward life be shaped in its image. So again, the whole thing is, believe shall be not until the work is done. Man shall grow up God shall grow up while we have webinars and seminars and talk over all this stuff. So friends, I think I've taken you through a long journey of human cycle, Idol of Humanity, extraordinary books. There's a third section of this book, War and Self-Determination, which Aurobindo wrote after these books were written, because he wrote them during the time of the war, Second War, 1919. He wrote one article after the war. So that becomes the third part of this book, called the single volume we have here. That is the 3 books in one volume: Human Cycle, The Ideal of Human Unity, and War and Self-Determination. War and Self-Determination is extremely interesting again, because it throws light on what is the world situation at present. So that, of course, I have not taken into consideration, because it's more on facts and figures that happened after the Second War. Well, however, that's why I said I'll take a long time, because I was concising, putting together 2 massive books, but they cannot be dealt separately, as you have seen. One is on the group level, the other is on the national level, international level. I hope I've put across some idea of these great books, wonderful books. Thank you very much. Next time we'll cover the last book, Foundations of Indian Culture. That is let us see because again, such a big volume and India is such a big thing, I'll have to choose 1 or 2 little pearls and diamonds from there to convey to you. Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you.